Nonprofits 101 with Brennan's son, class of 2014. We're so excited to hear from Brennan. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cassie Petoskey. I use she or they pronouns, and I'm the director of the Waldron Student-Alumni Connections program, where our goal is really to help Weinberg College students and all Northwestern College students really explore career options through connecting with alumni. So we're excited to do that today with Brennan. We'll hear from him for about 20 minutes, and then we'll get some information from Maggie at the Northwestern Career Advancement Office around some specifics around the industry and the timelines and things like that near the end. And students, if you have questions for Brennan, I would recommend holding those, typing those out and kind of holding on to them. And then when Maggie takes over at the end, you can send those in to Brennan through a private chat, and you can kind of go back and forth that way with some questions. And as always, I recommend to students, please rename yourself with your class year and your pronouns on the Zoom room, just so we know a little bit more about who we're speaking with today. And I would really encourage students to turn on your cameras. You're more engaged when you have your camera on. We know who we're speaking with. And it doesn't matter if you're logging in from a messy dorm room or wherever you may be. It's just really helpful to see who we're speaking with. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Brennan to just share a little bit more about what he studied at Northwestern, along with what he's doing today.
Hey everyone, and thanks for welcoming me, Cassie. Like Cassie said, I'm Brennan's son. I use he, him pronouns, and I currently work as the Deputy Director of External Affairs at a nonprofit organization called Media Matters. So Media Matters is a progressive advocacy organization that does research and public education about conservative misinformation in the media with a focus on social media platform accountability, Fox News, and then the ways that misinformation or trends can creep into mainstream media as well. And in my role as external affairs, which I think makes me a really good person to talk to about the nonprofit space, is that I'm working with other organizations, other advocacy nonprofits, foundations to make Media Matters research actionable and successful to help make sure that the people who need it have access to it. So I work with a wide variety of people in other nonprofits and advocacy groups. I am from Little Rock, Arkansas, and I currently live in Brooklyn, New York. My job is based in DC, so I lived there for about 8 years before moving to Brooklyn. I graduated Northwestern in 2013, but I was class of 2014, and I will admit that when I was in college, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I don't think I thought about working in the nonprofit or advocacy space until I was a senior. But I went in as a theater major and ended up graduating with that. But I also accumulated a psychology major and the integrated marketing communication certificate. So I had a lot of different types of classes. I studied abroad. I really got to experience a lot of things before sort of finding my path to where I am now. And I've worked at Media Matters for 8.5 years, which I think is not quite as typical for a lot of my peers. A lot of my friends have moved around in various jobs, but I've been lucky enough to advance through my own organization over these years, which has been a really great fit for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it sounds like such interesting work, such important work that you all are doing at Media Matters. And so interesting that you get to work with some different organizations across the nonprofit space. And I really want to start with just a broad definition. I know there's a lot that goes into nonprofits, but can you define the nonprofit space in general for students who are wanting to learn more about it?
Totally. The nonprofit space is quite large, although it does represent a smaller portion of the workforce than for-profit companies. So a nonprofit organization is kind of what it sounds like. It's an organization that's not aiming to make a profit. It's not a corporation, a brand. It's not a consulting firm. So it's really an organization that has a status through the government, a 501(c)(3) status to which they we don't have to pay taxes because we're not paying. The company doesn't, or the organization doesn't. I obviously have to pay taxes. So they're usually organizations with a public good or an aim for a public good And there are a really wide range of them, such as public education organizations like my own. There's foundations which give nonprofits money, research and science organizations, organizations that raise money for cancer research or things like that. Arts, a lot of theaters and arts organizations are nonprofits. There are direct service organizations like soup kitchens, food banks, ones that offer legal services, food, clothes, what have you. There's advocacy organizations like Planned Parenthood, Human Rights Campaign, and then there's broader legal organizations, so not ones that are offering sort of direct legal help, with maybe immigration or housing or something, but ones that are looking at bigger legal or questions of our time that may even be arguing before circuit courts or the Supreme Court even. So it's a really wide sector, which I think makes it great for careers because, whether your interest is a specific issue or type of advocacy or a specific community like the LGBTQ community, or even skills like tech or IT, there's really kind of a position there for everyone or an organization that will fit sort of everyone's interests, which is one of the things that really attracted me to this sector.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Brennan. And to kind of go off script a little bit, I'm just curious, like from your perspective, being in the nonprofit space for a while, like do people come into nonprofits because of their interest in the topic, the mission, or because they're good at the specific job, the person, like the marketing or whatever it is in the organization? What do you see more often?
I wish I could say I saw one more often, but I would say it's pretty split. I mean, a lot of people are really passionate about a specific cause. One thing that's really great about Media Matters is in a lot of ways we're like a nonprofit newsroom. So we have people who came to our organization because they have an issue in a specific topic that they may even focus on. I was our LGBTQ program director where we did research on media coverage of LGBTQ issues for 4 years. But other people come in because they're journalists and they've worked in newsrooms and they have journalism degrees and they're interested in the media. So that is more of a, I guess, skills based than a topic or interest based. And I think you can say the same thing for other positions. Some people might have comms backgrounds. A lot of people might even come from companies like or consulting firms doing marketing or PR, for instance, and move from those firms to the nonprofit space because they really want to focus on a specific issue. You might do comms at a firm where you're having a mix of, and this is actually something I did. I worked in public affairs. I had an internship and I had a mix of private companies and nonprofits as my focus. And then ended up, moving more into the nonprofit sector. And that happens all the time. Someone might go from a PR firm to be the vice president of comms at a specific nonprofit, or even go between these kinds of jobs in the government. That's something that happens a lot too. I mean, one of my friends worked in comms for campaigns, and then he worked at Media Matters, and now he's the press secretary for the UN spokesperson. So there's a lot of ways that you can take those specific skills and come into the space, and then move from this space, to a corporation or a firm, or vice versa. If you're really passionate about an issue, you could come and do different types of jobs. You could do external affairs at one LGBTQ organization and research at another, or, do LGBTQ work at a bigger organization that focuses on a lot of things. So there's really an entry point for almost everyone.
Yeah, that's really helpful and really interesting. And for students who are on the call today who are thinking, oh, this sounds great. I want to work in nonprofits, or that sounds like something I might be interested in. Can you kind of share some of the skills that are needed for someone to be successful in nonprofits?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of different skills, a lot of degrees that can lead to various positions. I think, I sort of alluded to this before, but the roles that you have here can span the gamut. You could come and work in a nonprofit and really not have to talk to many people. You could work in IT, you could be working with, we use a lot of complicated technology and we have a really amazing IT team. So you can come from that. I mean, we have people who come from the finance and accounting background, people who do social media and digital work, people who do research. You could even be, an actor and go into an arts nonprofit. So As far as skills, there are a wide variety of them, so you can really tailor that to you. That said, I do think that some of the base skills, like being a good writer, can be extremely important. I mean, I'm constantly writing correspondence to other organizations. I used to write for our website. I'm writing grants and things like that. So I think writing and generally being a good communicator are pretty key. But not every nonprofit job will necessarily have those, but I think that most of them will involve it. But like I mentioned before, if you have sort of a math or other interests, you can go into the field from that. And I would say another thing that really helps is to be passionate about the issue that you're working on, or to have the capacity to become passionate about it. I'm very lucky in that I really stand for the mission of my organization, media accountability, and that is very crucial to me because the day in and day out of my job can be a bit negative because we're looking at sort of right-wing misinformation. We're looking at attacks on various communities. It's not always fun. I wouldn't recommend watching hours of Fox News unless you have to. So being passionate can really help. But that said, I think that there's a lot of ways that you can work for a nonprofit that you start to become passionate about the mission. You may have a general interest in, working for an advocacy organization, and maybe the specific issue that is near and dear to your heart is not something that has jobs available at the moment. So maybe you work for one that's kind of something that you care about or you're interested in, but it's not your number one passion. And you can really find an interest in that. Similarly, at my organization, people may come in and have an interest in reproductive rights or LGBTQ rights and have a more general researcher job. So they may get to touch on some of those issues that they're interested in, but then learn that they're really interested about in criminal justice or something like that. So I do think that being passionate or having the sort of curiosity to sort of go into an organization and learn about what they're doing and learn about the specific topic that they focus on and maybe become passionate as you do that are really crucial.
Yeah, that's great. And it does run the gamut of all the different things you can do at a nonprofit. Excuse me. But I'm curious if we could talk about like entry level jobs, like what is more typical for entry level? Because it seems like now what you're doing with working with, other organizations, your career leading up to that probably made you really good for the external relations role. That may not be something someone right out of school is going to be doing. What are the types of work that we typically see for the entry level jobs?
Yeah, at Media Matters, for instance, we have a lot of entry level jobs. So we have, and the titles are going to differ across organizations, but we have analysts, we have media analysts who are taking in data on the media, reviewing media coverage and identifying trends, and sort of the ones who are kind of the most directly interacting with it. We have researchers, and I think researchers are a job that you're going to find as an entry or sort of lower entry, or we also have senior researchers that so that it doesn't necessarily have to be an entry level job. I think that's something you'll find at a lot of nonprofits, particularly any kind of research or educational or advocacy organization. And research requires, it requires a lot of skills like communications, being good at using the internet and looking at primary sources, identifying good sources, having a healthy dose of skepticism on what you're encountering to sort of ask questions about what could be better or what may be missing from different reports. And that's on our research team. And then we have associates, if you're interested in social media or comms, PR, or external affairs, for instance. They're usually associate kind of jobs, which I think would also be mirrored at a lot of other nonprofits. And that may require things like drafting press releases, drafting emails, taking notes on calls, putting together memos and briefing documents, vetting different people who might be contacting us. And I also think that is something, whether it's called an associate or not, that will be at a lot of educational organizations, advocacy organizations, and even, thinking, the interesting thing about the nonprofit sector is you could have me talk on this, but then you could have someone come and talk from like a cancer research organization, and they might have completely different things to say. So, their researcher is going to look very different than our researcher. Their researcher is going to, I mean, I don't want to speak for that. I mean, probably be doing scientific research or helping with that as opposed to doing media research. So there's a lot of really cool jobs. I mean, I think even on the finance team, we have people who come into that from the entry level. So that'll give you sort of a good idea of it. And if you have any, questions, like Cassie said, you can message me in the chat if you have a specific interest and want to pick my brain about it.
Yeah, that's great. I have a lot of questions for you about your organization too, but I will wait for another time. But the next question I have for you for our students who are considering nonprofits is just what other key information they should know as they're considering a career. I'm kind of thinking through some of the questions, we often get around nonprofits, like, is it going to, can I make a good living, and what are the pros and cons, of working in nonprofits and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's both a reality and a misconception about the nonprofit industry. Some jobs, and particularly entry level jobs, don't pay a lot in it, especially when you're looking at, I mean, I'm lucky in that we're a national organization, so there tends to be more money in national organizations, especially if it's based in a big city. But if you're working for a small LGBTQ housing organization in a state in the South or something, there might not be much money in it. So it's definitely something that you have to take into account. But I wouldn't let, if the financial part of it is limiting you, I wouldn't let that completely limit you, because there is a lot of room for advancement. There are a lot of major organizations that, a vice president at a major organization easily makes into, mid $100,000 or more. So there's a lot of room for advancement and making money, but I don't think anyone really goes into nonprofits for the purpose of making money. That said, too, if that's kind of a question that you're having at the beginning of your career, it might be the case in which you want to start out at a firm or something that is in the private industry and sort of get some of those skills under your belt in a specific thing like comms or social media, or like even campaigns or something, and then move into a nonprofit at a higher level. But a lot of the big national advocacy ones, I think, pay a pretty comfortable salary. um, I would also say that if you have friends who are interested in, various things like journalism or media, which I know is very common at Northwestern because of Medill, that nonprofit journalism is something that I think is really worth considering. I mean, a lot of my friends who have gone into digital media and worked at places like BuzzFeed or such, it's a hard industry right now because there's not a lot of money in it, and the business model is still kind of figuring out its way. But nonprofits have a lot of job stability. Generally, like I said, I've worked at my job for 8.5 years. I have other friends at various nonprofits who have had theirs for a while. With the kind of political climate that's been going on and the economic climate, there is often a lot of funding for these kinds of jobs, and there is a different model and sort of incentive, I guess, for funding than a lot of traditional businesses or business or journalism, for instance. So I think it's something to consider as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's a lot of good information for students to consider and take into um account as they're deciding, making decisions for themselves and their careers. And my last question for you, Brennan, before we turn it over to Maggie for some other information, is just around how has your identity impacted your career?
Yeah. I mean, my identity has been really, really impactful for my career. When I was in 2013, going into my junior year, I had an internship at the Human Rights Campaign. I'm a gay man, and so I was working in their youth and campus outreach, and was paired with a mentor there who kind of helped me get my first job, which was a paid internship at a public affairs firm. One of my clients there was also the Human Rights Campaign, and in 2013, as a student, I was doing a lot of organizing on campus, organizing phone banks. This was before marriage equality. was legal in Illinois and the rest of the country. So I was really, energized and passionate and able to work on an issue that was really important to me. And it just happened to lead into a career. Eventually, that background really helped me get my job at Media Matters. And I worked at Media Matters for, I think about for 2 years in the research department before a position opened up in the LGBTQ team. And several people applied internally, but luckily I had a past history of working in LGBTQ rights and was given that job. And that is really what allowed me to become a program director, which allowed me to work a lot with other organizations, other LGBTQ organizations specifically, which is then what led to my current role. So my identity was really crucial in that for me. And I also am Chinese American, and that has been a little bit less crucial in this work, although we do have conversations sometimes with groups doing research around the Asian American community, and I do love being part of those conversations as well. But I've just had less of a professional experience working on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, Brennan. Thank you so much for sharing and so much for all the information around nonprofits. It's such a big space and it's so exciting to hear just the important work you're doing and some other important work, of course, that folks can do in different areas. So we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with students and hopefully they'll have some questions for you. If they do, they'll send them through the private chat. And at this point, I'd love to turn it over to Maggie. I'm gonna spotlight Maggie's video and get some more information from Northwestern Career Advancement.
Great. Thank you, Cassie. And thank you so much, Brennan, for sharing more about your experience and the nonprofit sector as a whole. It's great to hear more about the variety of opportunities and just like the range of things that you can do within the industry. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I have a couple of slides that I will go through quickly here in the time we have left. And please, like Cassie said, feel free in the meantime to use the chat to ask any questions. So give me a second here. Hopefully you can, yeah, does this look okay to everybody? You can see my screen. Great. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about nonprofits. So Brennan did a great job giving an overview, and just from the NCA perspective, I'm going to share a little more about how we can be supportive for students who are considering this for a career. I'm gonna admit someone from the waiting room, sorry, multitasking. So the first thing I want to point out is the NCA industry pages. So the information that you'll find here, we have a page around a variety of different industries, including a page on nonprofits. We'll expand a little bit on some of the things that Brennan mentioned, plus we highlight some relevant skills for the industry, some online resources specific to this industry, and just some key information that's helpful for students who are considering this for internship or job opportunities. The industry pages on the NCA page have a lot of information, and we try to cover as many industries as we can. But certainly, I would encourage you to take a look at those if you are if you're interested in learning more. We also on the industry page will link to some other like similar industries or other like relevant things that you might want to take a look at. So a couple of things here around relevant student organizations and on-campus opportunities that I want to highlight. There's lots of opportunities at Northwestern to get involved with things that might connect to some of your interests. So like Brennan mentioned, a lot of people might get into nonprofit because they're passionate about a particular cause or issue or the mission of an organization. So lots of organizations on campus that give you the chance to get involved with different things like that and maybe develop some of those skills like fundraising or grant writing or communication with external organizations. So there's a few examples here, though there's a lot more to look at. And the other kind of campus office that I like to spotlight for students considering opportunities in nonprofit is Northwestern's Office of Community Engagement. So there's lots of opportunities through that office to partner with Chicago-based organizations, Evanston-based organizations, again, around different interests, like there's education programs, there maybe, community or like public health programs. There are lots of ways to partner with organizations that align with a potential interest. So if nonprofit is something you're interested in, I definitely encourage you to consider getting involved with some of the like service-oriented groups or community groups on campus. I also want to talk a little bit about hiring timelines. So generally speaking, nonprofits tend to recruit throughout the academic year, but often closer to when they actually want people to start their position. So if they're hiring interns, the recruiting might happen a little closer to the summer. And if they're looking to hire someone for a full-time role, the hiring cycle might take place a little closer to when they want you to start. So closer to the end of our academic year. Oftentimes we see more of this, what we call just-in-time or as-needed hiring, rather than or opposed to what you see in some industries, which is like very active recruiting, let's say in the fall. That is not necessarily the norm for nonprofit organizations. There are some larger nonprofits or larger organizations that might recruit earlier in our academic year, which is why on this graphic, the timeline kind of covers more space here. But I noted a couple of those on the slides, and I would say, at least in my experience in career advancement, those would be the exception to what we typically see across the nonprofit sector. So all of that to say that the hiring does happen throughout the year, but tends to be a little closer to when you actually may want to start a position. A couple of resources linked here. We also include these on the industry page I mentioned before. So that nonprofit industry page on the NCA website has a section on online resources specific to the industry. But these are resources where you can learn more about the field, learn more about potential organizations, and in many cases also look at available internship and job opportunities or available opportunities to get involved in like volunteer capacity. So I definitely suggest checking some of those out if you're actively looking for things to do this summer or after graduation. I also listed a couple of related occupations, and Brennan talked about a couple of these. There's a lot of overlap between some of the like causes or issues or advocacy you could be doing in some of these roles compared to what you might do at a nonprofit organization. So some other things to consider there if you're thinking about opportunities. And then I just want to spotlight a couple other quick things. So one is the career fair. Northwestern Career Advancement has our career fair coming up on January 31st. And we have a lot of interesting and exciting nonprofit organizations attending. So it's a virtual fair. You can find information, including how to register on Handshake, but there's an opportunity at the event to engage with some nonprofit organizations, either in like group sessions kind of like this, where the organization might share some information about what they do, their mission, how they work with the community. And there's some opportunities to talk specifically one-on-one with employees of those organizations to learn more about any like upcoming roles and things that they might have available. So certainly encourage you to check out the career fair and relevant employers participating there. That can be a great opportunity to start having some conversations and learning more about opportunities in this space. I also want to spotlight the industry newsletters. So NCA sends out industry newsletters based on specific interest. If you haven't updated your interest in Handshake, I suggest doing that. If you click on your name in the top corner, it's either usually your initials or your photo, depending how your profile is set up. You'll see a section about industries. You can select the things that you're interested in, and then we send some tailored communication to students based on those interests, including a nonprofit and education newsletter that I think goes out every like 3 or so weeks to students with that interest. So if you haven't registered for those or you don't know what we're referring to, you can talk to your career advisor to be sure you're getting those, but I would double check the industry interest in Handshake. And then quickly, I'm just going to talk through the summer internship grant program. I like to spotlight that for this industry specifically, because although, like Brendan said, there is some funding, across the nonprofit space, sometimes we see that internships are not paid, and Northwestern Career Advancement has a program called SIGP to help fund students who are doing unpaid or very low paid work over the summer. So there's some examples there of internships in the nonprofit space that SIGP recipients have done in the past. These were unpaid internships where the students applied for our grant program and then were awarded a $3,500 grant to help support their living expenses for the summer. So if you are searching for internships and you find that some of them might be unpaid or not as well paid as what you're hoping for, what you need for your living expenses for the summer, I would definitely encourage you to apply for SIGP. It's a great program, and we see lots of students participating in this program who are working in the nonprofit sector. I manage that program as well, so if you ever have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me too. And then certainly I would encourage you to connect with NCA. So if you've not met with a career advisor, you can do that in two ways. We have appointments Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5, and cover any kind of topic related to career exploration, career development, applying for roles, getting your materials ready. You can see some things listed there, and you schedule those through Handshake. We also offer live chat or drop-in hours Monday through Friday from 12 to 2. Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, those are virtual. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, it's actually reverse. This slide is incorrect and I apologize. Tuesdays and Thursdays is in person in our office at 620 Lincoln. So I would encourage you, that's like a great way if you have a quick question or just want to stop in and talk to someone and didn't have something scheduled in advance. We are certainly there to meet with you. And that's all. That was a lot of content in a short period of time. So thank you for bearing with me while I rush through some of it, but certainly encourage you to look at the NCA website and explore some of the resources there, and then meet with NCA for, further conversations and certainly talking about your own kind of career interests and strategy. That's what we're here for. I'll pass it back over to you, Cassie, if you want to wrap us up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maggie. That was great. Thanks everyone so much for being here today. And Brennan, of course, thank you so much for all the great information. And students, we hope you have a great rest of your day, and go Cats.
Thank you.